with CSGO coming to an end, I think it's only fitting that we start to discuss who are the greatest players of all time. I want to celebrate the greatness. I want to celebrate the players that has inspired me, inspired you guys, and inspired an entire world of Counter-Strike with their individual brilliance. In this video, I'll make my top 5 list of the best players of all time in CSGO. I played against a lot of them, I played with a lot of them, and I've been observing, analyzing, and commentating a lot of them as well. So I know what I'm talking about. Now, my list is not definitive, and I would love to hear what your list looks like in the comment below. So let me know what your top 5 players of all time in CSGO look like. And while you watch the rest of this video, maybe think about it. Who of these players inspired you? Who of these players are you sympathizing with the most? Which one is your most likable player? That doesn't necessarily have to mean that he's the best. I would love to hear your opinions. I would love to see it in the comments below. But let's dive into it. The top 5 greatest CSGO players of all time. Also dreaming of a higher rank in Counter-Strike and maybe even want to go pro? Well, you come to the right place. One crucial aspect of improving as a player is finding the right guidance and the right environment to flourish, and that's why I wanted to lead your attention towards Gosu Academy. Not only do they offer amazing resources for improvement, every month Gosu Academy brings in top tier players and coaches to give exclusive lectures as well. You'll be able to learn from the best in the industry. You also get to meet and grow with a group of similar ranked players who are all just as passionate about Counter-Strike as you are. Everyone going through the link in the description gets a 30-day free trial. That's basically 30 days of free coaching from the best in the industry. So don't miss out on this amazing opportunity and sign up for Gosu Academy today. Let's start with the players that didn't make the top 5 list. I'm looking at Forest. I'm looking at Get Right. I'm looking at Olofmeister. I'm looking at Guardian, Fallen, to some extent even Flush at JW. Some of these guys who's been around for a long time. Dupree for that matter as well. There's so many players that you could argue would be close to the top 5, but just didn't quite make it. Some of them, or some of these players I mentioned right here, perhaps is on your list, and that's fair enough. I would argue Olofmeister was very close to making it to my list. Fallen up there as well. Dupree, Electronic, you name it. Now, I think the reason why they didn't make it is the 5 players I have selected are just slightly better. What you think of a period of 2013 all the way up until 2023, which we're in right now, there's been so many great players who've shown consistency, who've shown peaks, etc, etc. Take Kenny S as an example. I think when Kenny S was in shape, he was arguably the best player I've ever played against, but his consistency was a massive issue. He had a couple of good months, then he faded out, then he had a couple of good months, then he faded out. So he's not in contention. He was not even close making my top 5 players of all time list, despite I think that his peak and his ceiling was probably the highest of everyone. So now that you know that those players didn't make it, I guess you're getting a little bit more excited to hear who's my 5th player. So let's dive into number 5. Number 5 on my list, greatest players of all time in CSGO, is coldzera. I think coldzera have had a fantastic career. Now, his career could have been a little bit longer. I think that's why he's not in contention to be top 4 or top 3 for that matter. But he had 2 years where he was outstanding. We're talking 2016, where he was ranked the best player in the world, and 2017, where he was ranked the best player in the world. He's only one of 3 players who's ever managed to do that. Win the best player in the world 2 years in a row. Next to him, Simple and Saibu, right? That's the caliber of player that coldzera was. In 2018, he dropped down to number 10 in the world, but he did it as a rifle. That's the thing I want to point out right here. Back in the early days of CSGO, 13, 14, 15, 16, Get Right, Olofmeister, those guys, they kind of dominated the top list, but they did it as hybrids, riflers, AWPers in that regard. Just so did coldzera. Now, the last 3 or 4 years, the top 10 list of players in the world have been dominated mainly by AWP players. The AWP is just a great weapon. It's hard to shut down a great AWP player today. Now, coldzera back in the day made it look like you didn't need an AWP to be the best player in the server. He dictated the game from what you today would describe as a supportive role almost. Take his position, CT side on Train as an example. He played Ivy. Back in my days, that was the least favorable position. It's a supported position. It's a position where you're often, let down in a 2v2 or 3v3, or you have to go to the inner bomb side and retake, but coldzera was the best in the world at exactly that. He also had the ability to pick up the AWP once in a while. He could play the secondary AWP, so he was super, super versatile. Fact of the matter is, he dominated Counter-Strike for 2 years. 2016 and 2017, coldzera was the best player in the world, and he did it in this what I would describe today as a supportive element role. I don't think I've ever seen a player do that to that level, which is why I think coldzera deserved the 5th spot on my top 5 players of all time. Number 4 on my list is none other than Device. Not only is he number 4 on my list, he's also won 4 majors, which is pretty goddamn good, all things considered. Only Dupree, with his 5th major, is a higher winner in that regard than Device. He's also arguably the best teammate of all time in CSGO, which is what I'll dive into right now. A lot of people have Device very high, maybe even as the GOAT of CSGO. When you look at his trophy cabinet, what he's achieved with Astralis, and how much he's won in terms of prize money, trophies, medals, you name it, sure, you can argue that Device is in contention to be the best of all time. But my list is made from an individual point of view. Device is fantastic. Device is great, especially in his Astralis days. He was a force to be reckoned with. But he also did play on a team where he was surrounded by great teammates who all fit perfectly into their roles, which made Device able to focus simply on what he does best, which is killing people with the AWP running into his crosshair. Never the most exotic, never the most inspiring AWPer in that regard, but he did everything by the books, and he did it to such a high level that it was impossible not to get inspired by that. A lot of people were always mentioning Device as, if you ever want to look at an AWP player and you want to learn something, you want to see a demo and see how you can play, look at Device. He was a reference point for everyone back in the day because he made everything look so easy. He did it by the books, the A, the B, the C's, and he did it to a level that no one else has been able to do ever since. So in regards to whether or not Device should be placed higher on my list, some of you guys have maybe already put him higher on your personal list. Fair enough, let me know in the comments. But I think from an individual point of view, he never hit a peak like the Saivu, the Simples, the Kenyas of the world, coldzera for that matter as well. He was never the best player in the world, and that also justifies the fact that he's never been ranked number 1 on the HLTV player list of the year, ever. He's been in top 5, he's been in top 3 many times, and his consistency is probably his greatest attribute, and the fact that he was a great teammate. As I said, he is the most winning player of all time. He's probably the guy that I would build my team around if I could back in 2017, 2018, but in terms of being the best individual player, I don't think he's quite up there, which is why he's number 4 on my list. But make no mistake, just because he's not the most stylistically pleasing AWP player, he's not flicking around left, right, and center, I take a lot of credit, and I think a lot of credit should be put towards the name of Device for how he's always been able to conduct himself, how he's been able to be consistent, and how he's been able to do that to a level where everyone would always reference him as the guy they wanted to look up to. He was an inspiration for a lot of players, myself included. Device, congratulations with your 4th place. It is amazing to consider that you are the 4th best player of all time in a game that is played by millions of people. Make no mistake. Number 3 on my list is none other than Nico, the greatest rifle player of all time. Hands down, absolutely a beast with a rifle in his hand. Now, I already spoiled it because we're going to discuss the top 5 greatest riflers of all time in CSGO as well, and trust me, Nico's going to be top of that list. Now, the reason is that he's remained competitive. He's remained a guy that always put himself into a conversation where he didn't really belong. The lists have been dominated by AWP players. You talk your Simples, your Shiros, your Saivus, your Fallen, your Device. All these great AWP players have dominated the individual list for who is the best player, who has the highest rating. Yet Nico have always managed to put himself into that conversation. Now, he's never been labeled as the best player in the world for an entire year, but trust me, he's had periods where he was entering that conversation, even when Simple was at his absolute best. When Saivu was at his absolute best, Nico entered the conversation where you could argue, given that he was playing with a rifle in a less, I guess, favorable role, given he was an entry fragger, given that he put up his life all the time, he was in the conversation for whether or not we should consider him the best player in the world. That is outstanding. Imagine a football player in the era of Messi and Ronaldo still being so good that he puts himself into the conversation. Take an Eden Hazard, take a Mohamed Salah, you know, these players who are, they're never going to be the best of the best in the world in terms of football, but they still put themselves into the conversation even when Messi and Ronaldo were dominating their respective leagues. That's how good Nico is, and that's why I'm putting him 3rd on my list. Aesthetically pleasing, his aiming, his crosshair placement. I've never seen a guy who's so goddamn good at everything he does with the rifles and the pistols for that matter. His consistency as a rifler as well, unheard of. We spoke coldzera, he was good for 2.5 years. Nico, he's been great for 5, 6, 7, maybe even nearing in on 8 years. years. Fact of the matter is he's the most consistent rifler we ever had, and he also has the highest ceiling, which is why he deserves the 3rd place on my list. Number 2 on my list. And now we get down to the nitty-gritty, because I think you guys can guess who number 1 is then. Number 2 on my list is a French player who's been a professional player for 4.5 years. Goes by the name of Saivu. Now, Saivu, in my books, cannot be considered the greatest of all time in CSGO, because there is a guy from Ukraine who's been better for slightly longer, but we'll discuss that in a couple of moments. Now, Saivu and his career is nothing but outstanding. He's been a professional player for 4.5 years, and let me just walk you through this. In his debut year, he was ranked the #1 player in the world. That's pretty goddamn cool in your debut. No one has ever come close to doing that, and no one ever will be close to doing that. I don't think so, at least. 2020, he was also the best player in the world. 21, he was ranked number 2. 2022, he was ranked number 2 as well. So the worst placement Saivu has had in terms of individual ranking of the best players in the world is number 2. That is outrageous consistency, especially considering that the Vitality iterations he was playing in the beginning wasn't necessarily the greatest. They were struggling a little bit, and without Saivu, one could only imagine how bad it would have been in Vitality. Now this year, 2023, he is undoubtedly the best player of the world. Simple have dropped off a little bit. Device is at a high level, but not quite up there. The same for Shiro. There's no doubt right now, Saivu is the best player in the world. So you look at his 5 years as a pro player, he's going to be ranked number 1 3 times and number 2 2 times. If that doesn't scream GOAT material, I don't know what will do. Now, the only reason I only have him as number 2 is that we have Simple, of course, the greatest player of all time in CSGO. And had Saivu been born just, let's say, 2 or 3 years earlier in his life, had his parents basically gotten the job done, so to speak, a little earlier, I think Saivu would surpass Simple. Simple has never shown that amount of consistency in terms of from his debut year. He had to learn, he had to grow into it, he had to become what he is today. Saivu instantly became the best player in the world from day one. No one has ever done that before, and that's something that needs to be mentioned when we have this conversation. A lot of people, I assume, have Simple as number 1, Saivu as number 2, and that's fair enough, but I hope that you guys have them very close. There's not this big of a distance between the two anymore. Nah, it's more like this. I've said it before, I'm gonna say it right here, right now, so you have it on video as well. In 3 years from now, Saivu will surpass Simple as the greatest Counter-Strike player of all time. So we can have this discussion with Forrest, with Get Right, with Neo back from the 1.6 days, the Simple, the Saivus. In 2 or 3 years from now, Saivu will be at the same level he is today in CS2, and he will have surpassed Simple, because I think Saivu will be ranked number 1, number 2, number 3 within the next 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 years as well. He's a natural gifted guy, and he's also arguably one of the best teammates that I've ever seen, at least from speaking to his teammates, at least from listening to the voice comms, etc, etc. He never causes any troubles, any issues, which can't really be said about Simple. So for my money, Saivu, number 2 on the list, probably the greatest player Counter-Strike is ever gonna see in a couple of years from now on. But let's return to that video when time is. For now, he plays number 2, and I sincerely hope that you guys have him on your list. 1 in his name, 1 in the game. It's hard to argue against Simple being the greatest CSGO player of all time. Now, as I just said before, Saivu came very close to enter that conversation, but when you look throughout the years, of course Simple is number 1. He's been dominating Counter-Strike more or less ever since 2018. Fact of the matter is he's been outstanding. His consistency has been up there. Already in 2016, he was placed as the 4th best player in the world. In 2016. Today it's 2023, and he's not been outside of the top 2 ever since 2018. That's how good Simple has been in Counter-Strike. Even when Saivu came in and he challenged him, even when Saivu came in and he labeled and claimed the prize as the best player in the world, Simple remained competitive, and they remained very close. So there's a big difference in saying that, yes, Simple was maybe only number 2 in 2020 or 2021, but it was so goddamn close that you almost couldn't tear the two apart. That's how good Simple is. He's inspired, I would argue, an entire world of Counter-Strike players. He can play the ABCs of the game. He can clutch. He can be spectacular. He can flick. He can do the most crazy shit that you've ever seen in your life, and he will do it consistently. Now, I will say one thing. Simple will go down in history as the greatest CSGO player of all time, but it's not like he was flawless. His communication, his I guess awareness as being a teammate. We've seen his flaws. We've heard ex-teammates saying that he's not easy to play with, etc, etc. But I think he's developed. I think he's matured to a point where it's getting better and better and better. So when you compare him to a guy like Saivu from the outside, who just looks like the perfect guy. You can't put a finger on anything ZywOo is doing. Simple has had his struggles throughout his career, but he's overcome those. He's grown to be a better man. He's grown to be a better player, and that's something I think deserves recognition as well. He's gotten his majors in CSGO. He's played some fantastic Counter-Strike, and he will go down in CSGO history as the greatest of all time. He can do it with the AWP, he can do it with the rifle, he can do it with the pistol, and even more so, if need be, he can do it with his mouth. He got a lot of attitude, and I absolutely love to follow Simple in the pro scene. I hope he's gonna stick around for CS2, and I hope he's gonna be just as good, even though I think that whole, power thing between him and ZywOo perhaps is starting to switch a little bit, but I guess we'll have to wait and see for 2024. Now, that is my top 5 list of all time. I think it's a pretty good list, but I'm also open to suggestions. As I've said, I'm sure you guys have a different list, a different outlook, maybe certain players you feel that I'm underrating or I should have rated higher, and trust me, that's totally fine. These lists will always be, personally motivated and a little bit biased in a sense that what I've experienced as a player, as an analyst, etc. And sometimes maybe you're not giving X, Y, and Z enough credit. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Who is your top 5 greatest players of all time in CSGO? And I'll look through the comments, I'll engage with some of you guys, and we can have a discussion about it. You're also more than welcome to tweet me or go to X and find my account. You find me at Pimp CS2, and we can have the discussion in there as well. Thank you so much for watching, guys. More videos will come out. Top 5 greatest riflers, top 5 greatest AWP players, top 5 greatest in-game leaders. This is going to be a cool series, and I hope you guys are going to watch along.